One of the trickiest parts about being a teacher is having a difficult conversation with parents. Hi everybody, welcome to Talk and Chalk. I'm Beck. I'm an assistant principal in Southwest Sydney. This is my YouTube channel where I just share my tips and bits of advice about anything education related. I don't sell, I don't spam. Sometimes it's just me waffling into the camera, which is what I'm going to be doing today. My hubby got me a nice new microphone, so hopefully you can hear me loud and clear and the tech side of this will work fine. Cross our fingers, see how we go. For those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. All my buttons and everything are in the description below. You can just open that up. You have to open this up into YouTube to be able to access the description, which has my links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you want to follow me on those. Otherwise, I might pop my links, well, not links, my, what do you call them? Names on the top here. I'll do that. It's a good thing I don't require a lot of editing when I'm just talking into the camera. Anyway, today's topic though has been one that's been highly requested. I've had lots of people messaging me asking if I could share my tips on having difficult conversations. Most of the time people are specifying with parents. Sometimes we have to have difficult conversations with our peers, with our kids, but parents can sometimes be the trickiest. So what I've done is I've used my trusty notebook to jot down a bunch of ideas related to my experiences. Remember, I'm no expert in this. This is just me sharing what works for me, what I believe has worked for the people that I've worked with as well. These are things that, you know, I've gained wisdom from others, and sometimes I've just benefited from the experience of being in these scenarios. And it's not always a fun scenario to be in that meeting, having that difficult conversation with a parent. We need to be mindful of the fact that these can get emotional, that they can be very serious. Sometimes they require legal expertise depending on the scenario that you're in. And, you know, some days it's just tricky because it's a tricky day. So let's get into the notes that I've got and see what's helpful for you guys. Okay, so the first thing you need to be aware of, especially if you're a brand new teacher, is that these conversations can happen anywhere, anytime, sometimes completely unexpected. So sometimes you might have these scheduled depending on the purpose of the meeting, and sometimes they'll just come right out of left field on the playground, maybe even in the middle of lunch when you least expect it. I think when you're in that scenario, whether it's a scheduled meeting or an unexpected meeting, you need to acknowledge in your mind it's difficult. I know there's lots of other language around these types of conversations. I think one I've heard is called having courageous conversations, which they are, absolutely. But don't dismiss the fact that it's hard. These conversations are hard. And if you try and trick your mind into thinking it's anything other than that, I think you're going to make it more difficult for yourself if you don't acknowledge that. We need to be able to say, this is going to be a hard thing to do. I can do it. One of my favorite TV shows, which is called Firefly, which my daughter is named after. She's not called Firefly. There's an episode where one character says to another character who's going through something very, very difficult and painful at the time, this is just a moment in time, step aside and let it happen. I love that quote. And I use that quote myself when I'm going through those difficult times. This is just a moment in time, step aside, let it happen. So even though in my mind, I'm just saying it's going to happen, you know, in front of me, it doesn't mean I'm shutting down or not participating in it. It just means that in my mind, I know this moment will not last forever. This feeling will not last forever. I can deal with this. So acknowledge to yourself, this is difficult. It's going to be a difficult thing. Try not to lose too much sleep over it if possible. So those two different types of meetings, you've got your scheduled and your unprepared. For me, I found that the scheduled meeting is always the easier one, pretty much because you can prepare for it. So different reasons that you might have for a scheduled meeting could be, you know, behavior of the student, their learning needs, whether it's they've got high learning needs or low learning needs. They might be gifted, they might be struggling. We don't know, you know, around those areas. There may have been a disclosure of some kind. And keep in mind, there are very specific procedures around disclosure. You are not meant to investigate whatsoever. And I made a video called I'm Glad You Told Me That, which surround how to handle when a child discloses something to you. So I recommend going and watching that. There could be significant change in the child. There could be some family circumstances, or it could be because the child's health is at risk, or there is a healthcare plan that needs to be implemented, and it can be quite a serious process to go through. So those could be reasons that you have one of those scheduled meetings where things can become difficult. So ways that I recommend preparing for these meetings. is to just book a suitable time and place. And when I say suitable, I mean preferably somewhere a bit more formal, in the office where you've got backup if you need it. If things get insanely serious and you suddenly need the principal, or you need someone else, there's possibly someone else up there. Taking it out of the classroom a little bit, making it a bit more formal, making that emphasis that, we are focused on something here. This isn't just a random on the go meeting. Making sure you've got your documentation in place. So this can include, notes, teacher annotations. It could be formal documentation that you have in terms of testing or assessments. There could be counsellor reports involved in this. If it's around behaviour and you've got, documented incidents and it's increasing, have that documentation in front of you. You don't want to be stopping in the middle of a meeting to have to go and find this stuff to be able to, rack your brain for a right date, right time, right incident. Have that stuff there ready to go, and read through it before you go into the meeting as well. Just have it fresh in your mind. You might need some policies in place if this is the kind of thing that's leading towards a suspension warning or something like that. Make sure you have the right policy and procedure pertaining to your school and your system. Make sure you get the right people in that meeting. If this is not a meeting that requires the principal at that point, don't bring them in. Save them for when they're needed. You don't want to be bringing in the big guns when it's not up to that meeting. It kind of, loses its emphasis when you do things like that. But, you might need your assistant principal, might need the counsellor, you might need the homeschool liaison officer. You might need a caseworker if the family's involved in anything, any support services outside, that sort of a thing. If this is something to do with the child's needs and you need the speech therapist or the OT, invite them in, see if you can lock them in for that meeting time, and get the right people in that meeting. If it's a serious meeting and you need to be able to focus on the conversation at hand, I would be asking someone else who's coming to that meeting, possibly your supervisor or maybe the counsellor or someone else involved in it, to take the meeting minutes. Make sure things are being said, because you're going to go back later and go, oh, Mum said something about an AVO 2 years ago. I can't remember what that was and we didn't write it down. Make sure all that stuff is written down. If it's a less serious meeting and you're just touching base with that parent, even though it's a difficult conversation, you might be able to take notes as you go. And that's good for the parent to see that you are writing this down so that you don't forget all those things that you're going to be doing. The other thing is just be mindful that, a lot of our parents that are coming in might have small children. You can't always get a babysitter or something like that. So, have some toys, have some picture books or some drawing, pencils and paper around so they can play with that. If this isn't before school or after school meeting or something and the child that you are talking about is with you and there are things in there that you don't really want them hearing, see if you can get someone else to supervise them in another room with some activities. And just, reassure the parents they're safe, they're there, look, there they are, not a problem, but we just don't want them in the meeting for that time. Sometimes you need them in the meeting depending on what it's about too. So when it comes time to actually running the meeting, try and keep the tone neutral. I know some people like to really focus on the positive. Let's focus on the positive, that's our goal and everything. But when we do that, we may be negating those serious things that we need to focus on. So I just try and keep that neutral playing ground. Here are some positive things. Here are the negative things that we're trying to talk about, but here's our common goal. So be clear about that common ground. Be clear that we're all there for the student. We're all there to make sure that they are getting a quality education, that they are being successful, doing the right thing as expected of them, in the school setting, and this is where we're heading towards. I don't want them to be the best student in the world that's happy-go-lucky and la-di-da-di-da, that's not necessarily achievable. Here's our common ground. Let's look at that. Being non-confrontational. You're not coming in to say your child is bad, they're doing the wrong thing, students not following expectations at school at the moment. This is a concern and it's impacting their learning. What are we going to do to solve this? And you shouldn't be placing that onus on the parents, ever. It's not up to that parent to make sure their child is behaving at school. That parent can support you and the procedures that you put in place to make sure that child is doing the right thing at school. But they can't do anything from home. They can't do anything from work. They can try and provide reinforcement from home. Absolutely. Reinforcement, support. That common ground that we have there, we need to work together on it. So if you're putting things onto that parent that they can't achieve, pressure on the parent, you're losing that even-handed, level of teamwork that you've got, and then it's just not achievable. This is up to you, obviously, but for me personally, I like the idea that you can show emotion without getting emotional. And to be specific about that, I guess I mean, show, you can tell them this is upsetting when this happens, but you're not sitting there crying about it in front of them. And we're human. We cry. If it happens, it happens. If something is that bad and it happens, it happens. But I think when you get emotional about it, you then start to lose focus. You start to lose track of where you're at, and then you're going to miss key points. And that can be uncomfortable for other people in the room. It could be uncomfortable for the parent, and then they don't know how to respond, and they don't really know where you're coming from. And then you risk them not wanting to come and engage in meetings with you in the future. And that's not to say that you can't cry. That's not to say that you can't do those things as well. But I mean, as soon as you get angry or yell or swear or anything like that, you've lost your focus. So you can talk about how, look, I went home and I was really angry about this. I was angry because I've put in so much time and energy and effort into achieving this particular goal and it's not working. We need to refocus and find out what is going to work. You've been honest. You've shown them that you have emotion and compassion and that you care, but you haven't let it overrun you. You haven't let it control you. That emotion isn't controlling you. It's just something that's really part of that process. I think it's important to use evidence that you have as the driver for that conversation as well. So if it's something along the lines of you're worried about this child, they may have a learning difficulty, you think perhaps they might need to get assessed for some particular thing, whatever it may be, you use the evidence that you've got. Like, it can't be a feeling. I just feel like they have autism. I just feel like they have ADHD. I just feel like, there's something else going on there. You might have that inside yourself, that's fine, but you need to have evidence for that parent, because if they don't have that feeling, it sounds very contradictory and out of left field and I guess almost judgmental in a way. So have that evidence that says, I have documentation of this and this and this, and research and evidence says this could point to something. We really want to go get an expert opinion, GP, pediatrician, speechy, that kind of a thing. We really just want to make sure we know exactly what's going on before we pinpoint something down, which is why we recommend getting eyes and ears tested. Let's go get their eyes tested and see if they can actually see properly before we think there's something else going on. Try and avoid educational jargon and acronyms. And this isn't to say, you're not speaking down to them, you're just speaking plainly to them. So there's no point saying things like, I don't know, PBL, because quite frankly, most people in the teaching system will even go, are you talking about positive behavior for learning, or are you talking about project-based learning? Even our own acronyms are out to get us. That just creates more confusion. So just speak really plainly and clearly about things. So when we talk about sometimes tests that our counsellor has done, we talk about a cognitive assessment. There's other acronyms and things that are going on there. And when we say cognitive, I can't assume that all my parents understand what that means. Not all my parents speak English, so they may not know what I mean by cognitive. So we're talking about, how their brain works, how they learn. And don't make predictions. There's no point making a prediction saying, if you do this or if the kid does this, then this will happen. There's no reason to do that. There's no purpose behind doing that. It could create a false hope. And then you're just setting yourself up to fail if it doesn't actually work. You can say, our hope is that by doing this, we will achieve this. Let's give it a go. And have reasons behind it to back it up. Please don't make judgments on parenting skills. Even if it's in the back of your mind, that's fine. You can think whatever you want to think. And as teachers, we will see those parents where we go, what the hell are they doing? Why are they doing that? You're going to get nowhere if that comes through in the meeting. Even if your tone is judgmental, you've lost them. You're not going anywhere with that. So try not for that to come out as judgmental. And for me, I will be very clear about it. I will say, I'm not judging your parenting skills. I don't think you're a bad parent. Even if the back of my mind, even if I do, I'm going to say, I'm not judging you. We're just looking at the problem that's here and how we can work together to solve it. So once you've gone through everything, just make sure that common goal that you're working towards is very clear. Have it documented down. Have it documented to support the fact that you had the meeting, that you've reached a conclusion, and that's what you're going to be working towards. And then set up a process for touching base. Don't just leave it out there in the open. You need to be touching base, in the next couple of weeks, the next term. Don't just leave it and go, well, if it works, we won't say anything. Give positive feedback. Parents need to hear it. And if it's not working, parents need to hear that as well. They still need to know that you're trying, because, even me being a teacher, I feel like I don't have touch, with what my kids are doing every day at school. And I shouldn't. I don't need to have touch every single day with what they're doing at school. But, just that, I want to know. I want to know. The parents want to know. Even if they're working, even if they're home, they want to know what's going on. And just make sure that those goals that you're setting are like those SMART goals. They're achievable, they're realistic, they have a realistic timeline as well. Okay, so let's move on now to the harder meeting, the unexpected meeting. Now, I found in my experience that main things, those unexpected meetings often are usually driven by an emotional response from the parent. Or even an emotional response from the student. So things like bullying, exclusion, missing an opportunity for something, or some kind of miscommunication about something. And I find, again, in my experience, most parents that have this response are usually the parents that did not have a positive experience when they went to school. Those parents that had a positive experience when they went to school are usually the ones that are really good at playing devil's advocate, and they'll just come and speak to you plainly. They won't get up in your face. They won't get angry. They'll just say, oh, Johnny mentioned blah. Is that what really happened? As opposed to the parent that comes up and says, Johnny said blah. What are you doing about this? How come you haven't done anything about this? Those are the parents that have not had a positive experience at school. And there's no point denying it. There's no point sitting back going, oh, teachers don't always do that. We've got evidence in our teaching history that says, yes, kids were abused. Kids have been bullied by teachers. We know that kids used to get the cane for crying out loud. Like, this is part of our history. Don't ever sit there and go, there aren't bad teachers. We know there are. Now, that does not mean we're not trying everything we can do to make sure, that the system is full of quality teachers. But don't be so naive to think that they're all wonderful and everything's la-di-da out there. We know that there are teachers out there that have not always done right by all of their students. So we need to be honest about this. We need to acknowledge it. And you don't have to say that to them. You don't have to say, oh, I acknowledge you had a really hard time at school. In the back of your mind, acknowledge this person does not associate school as being a positive experience. It could create anxiety for that parent to come into the school. It could bring back all those feelings of bullying, of being dismissed, of sitting in detention when they couldn't control their own physical nature at school. They may have gone through school undiagnosed with something. We don't know until you've walked in their path. So you need to acknowledge in the back of your mind, this parent has a difficult time coming into school and talking to me. This is an emotional response. So whether or not they share those experiences with you, regardless, even if they give you all the details, doesn't matter. Our plan of action when this happens still should be the same. So the first thing you need to do is obviously attempt to calm them. Don't say calm down. Don't say calm down. Have you ever been into a fight with anyone and they tell you to calm down? It just makes you want to punch something. Don't tell them to calm down. So the first thing I like to do is offer a space to talk. So do you want to come in the classroom and we can talk about it where the kids aren't running around? Or do you want to go to the office and talk where the air conditioning is on and it's not so hot out here? That distraction method that sometimes we use with kids that works. Offer that space to do that. If they don't want to, that's fine. Have that conversation there if you need to. If it's completely inappropriate to have that conversation there, you need to be straight up and say, we can't have this conversation out here because there's kids around and it's inappropriate. We need to move to the classroom or to the office. And then you need to listen to them. Don't get oppositional with them, especially if all they're trying to do is offload and vent. This might be the moment where they've spent 10 weeks listening to little Johnny come home every day saying that Brandon is picking on him and tripping him over and taking his hat every single day, and they've listened and dealt with it. They could have spent 10 weeks saying, just ignore him. Just ignore Brandon. Don't worry. Just walk away from Brandon. But it's still happening. This is the moment they've lost it and they've gone, I'm done with this. I'm going to go say something now. I've stayed quiet long enough. and they've been building it up. Okay. Listen, let them get it out, listen, and acknowledge what they're feeling. And that can be very, I can see this has made you, very angry and upset, and I can see you're up here trying to protect your child. You don't have to agree with the concern. If you know full well Brandon's done nothing and Johnny's just being that's fine, but acknowledge they're very angry about it. And then you need to be honest if you don't actually know what's going on. Johnny hasn't said anything to me, nothing to me. I had no idea this was going on. Okay, I'll need time to talk to my supervisor. I'll need time to talk to, the other teachers that have seen this happen. If it's on the playground, I'm going to have to look up, the playground book and see if there's been an entry made and someone's forgot to tell me. Let me look into this, and we'll meet again tomorrow afternoon, or at the end of the week, Friday afternoon. So I will absolutely look into this. I will find out what's going on. And then what you can do is utilize that time to consult with your supervisor, your principal, and get any of that documentation together so that you can then have that scheduled meeting. Parent will be calmer at that point. You'll have evidence at that point. You'll have hopefully dates and things like that you'll be able to refer to. And in your mind, you will already have a bit of a draft plan of attack before going into that meeting. You'll know what to set up. So I wouldn't wait too long to have that meeting though. Someone coming in and saying so-and-so is taking his hat every single day, and then you leave that another week, that's another 5 days of school that hat's going to be taken if you don't do anything about it. Even if it means that just quick the next morning, all right, I'm talking to the kids today about blah, 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 blah. I'm going to get back to you, okay? So don't be afraid to do that. Essentially, those difficult conversations that are unexpected like that can be so quick and on the go. You're not going to remember what's going on or what they've said, and it just happens so fast, especially if they're angry. Key thing, if they are up in your face, getting very aggressive and possibly even violent, leave. You do not have to stay there and take that. That is not your job. So if they are getting like that and there is no one around, go to a space where there are other people. Obviously, the office is probably the most likely place. Go to that space, get support from someone there, and if absolutely necessary, just get on the phone to the police. There's a parent up here being aggressive. I don't feel safe. I need someone here. Usually going up to the office is a deterrent. They don't want to get up there because they know the principal's up there, that sort of a thing. And you absolutely do not have to stand there and take that whatsoever. You do not have to risk your safety at all. So make sure you're doing that. Keep that in the back of your mind. I don't have to take this. I don't have to take this. I can walk away if I need to. If you feel like they're starting to come, and you will pick up on that vibe, but, if necessary, just walk away. If you are a teacher in a situation where you can see that happening to someone else, same thing, go up to the office and get support. Don't leave your colleague there on their own for that. Okay. Moving into the last part now, just into how to debrief. So when those things happen, it's important to always document, whether it's the scheduled meeting, the unexpected meeting. Document what happened, report it to your supervisors, and keep them informed, because if things escalate, that's when they will have to step in and they can support you. Talk to a colleague. If there's confidential information that came out of that, you don't have to give that over. You don't have to vent that information in order to debrief with a colleague. You can go to the colleague and say, this just really intense thing happened with this parent. Some confidential stuff has come out. I can't say what it is, but I feel really edgy and anxious at the moment from it. And just have that debrief with them. Be with someone, be safe, be in a safe place and feel comfortable before leaving for the day. We don't want you walking to your car on your own if you feel anxious and upset like that. We don't want you driving like that. We want you to make sure that at the end of the day, you feel comfortable getting into the car to go home or walking to the station or anything like that. So please debrief with someone afterwards. Make sure you follow up. So if that thing happened, you've debriefed, you've reported, yada, yada, yada. A week later, you need to touch base with someone, touch base with them. See if the supervisor's heard anything. We don't purposely try and ignore you or anything like that. Sometimes just things get crazy and we forget to let you know. Sometimes we just miss touching base with you. It's not purposeful, believe me. After the beginning of this term, oh my gosh, I hope I haven't forgotten anything. And just continue to document that. Continue to document if you touched base with your supervisor or your principal, or if the parent touched base with you or a doctor or whatever. Make sure you document it in your diary. Last thing I'm going to leave you guys with now is don't be afraid to ask for support. You're not going to get judged if you have an angry parent in your face every single week, because that's a reflection on them, not you. If you've got 30 parents every single week in your face, then we might have an issue. But if those conversations with that parent aren't improving, please don't worry about asking for help. Sometimes there's just personality clashes. It's fine. We don't always get along. The benefit that I have often is that I'm a parent and I'm a teacher. If you are not a parent, it might be early years of teaching. Maybe you decided you didn't want to have kids. Maybe you can't have kids, whatever situation it is. I feel like there's always that thing with parents where they go, you don't understand, you're not a parent. You couldn't understand because you're not a parent. And no, I'm sure in some ways you do. I know that when I became a parent, I did look at things differently. I did feel things differently. So I try to use that to my advantage when it's things related to, being a mum, mama life, mama tears, those sorts of things. My little one just started preschool and he's gone to preschool now, only 1 day a week. But still, I try and make that connection with them, especially when it comes to things like special needs and getting assessments. That's something that I can relate to. My son is going through the NDIS review at the moment, and those people are wonderful and very helpful, but those reports are all focused on the need, which means it's all negative, which means when I walk out of that meeting, I feel like crap. I feel really deflated because it doesn't talk anything about, his achievements or successes or growth that he's made. It's all around what he can't do. And so when you're having that meeting with a parent, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like when you're in there, possibly trying to hold back tears, worried that the people at the table are judging you, and it's not pleasant. So if you can just acknowledge, I haven't walked in your shoes, but we're here to do it together. The focus is on the student. Let's focus on what we can do together to do that. Just keep that open, just make sure that they know you don't see them necessarily the way they're feeling at that moment. And if you can bridge that gap, then you'll just be so much more successful in what you're trying to achieve. So looking at my camera now, I can see I've rambled on for almost 27 minutes, and I'm hoping the microphone has held up. So hey, if the microphone worked, give me a thumbs up. And I can tell hubby it's working. Otherwise though, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I will put my button down here. You just hover over that, click to subscribe. If you're not in YouTube, you'll need to open this up into YouTube. I will pop another video at the top there, and send me through any other recommendations for future videos, guys. Have a great week. See you later.